I would write a fully fleshed out track with all of its elements, all of its parts. And when you just solo 2 or 3 or 4 instruments out of the 15 that are all firing at the same time, or 20 different sounds that are firing at the same time, it sounds like a new piece of music, even though it's quintessentially the same song, just another side of it.
Epitasis is cool. There's really no way to get around that. As a science fiction game inspired by electronic albums, it felt like the perfect place to start talking about the intersection of design and music in games. Fortunately, it was created by just 2 people, designer Lucas and composer Pejman, and they were both kind enough to join me for what was destined to be an excellent conversation. I'm Bryan Kelly, and thanks for joining us for an evening at the Roost.
Epitasis is a puzzle exploration game set on a sci-fi alien world. Essentially, you get transported there through a portal you find on Earth, and your whole mission is to essentially find a way back while exploring ancient ruins of a long-lost race that used to inhabit the planet. I worked on it for about, 3 years, and a little over a year into its development, Pejman came along through, I guess it was a Kotaku article, right?
More or less, the Kotaku article was featuring Epitasis and mentioning how much it looks like Taiko's artwork, but not just like the static art, but the whole world resembled what Taiko's music would look like if it was a visually real world. And so Epitasis exuded Taiko's artwork brought to life in a world where you could move around and explore. And that's what the article was about.
And you were already a Taiko fan.
Yeah, we were both Taiko fans, and
right.
both my best friend and my girlfriend, that same day the article came out, texted me, this is you written all over it, or like you need to you should see this, something like that, along those lines. And then I looked up Lucas's website after reading that article and found his email there, and just shot in the dark reached out to him.
So that was I think that was early 2017, and I had been working on it since then for probably like 6 months, and the whole time I've worked on it, it's always been in my free time and stuff like that. But so that was only, I guess, 6 months into development, and then Pejman's been there pretty much every step of the way since then. I don't think the game would be the same if he hadn't come along, because I think the music is one of its very defining attributes, and again, that goes back to how big of an influence just like Taiko was, or Boards of Canada, and a few other bands. And when I'm working on a new project, even this new one that I mentioned, it's one of my main things I go to is always music for some reason. That just resonates with me the most.
Yeah, that's really cool, because you often hear about musicians looking at like the artwork and stuff to design a game. But it's really interesting to hear about a game designer looking to different music to inspire their design.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but just something about listening to music brings a lot of imagery to my mind itself. Mm-hmm. So it really helps me bring these worlds to life, I guess. Yeah, it was pretty much instant, after I listened to Pejman's, demo reel essentially that he sent me over. And because before that I had spoken with a few other musicians, and there was one that I guess I had been working with for like, a couple months or something, but all of them, are more traditional. But when Pejman comes along and he already knows Taiko, and, his music is already sort of
just, more electronic, Taiko definitely was our initial bond. game music can often be pigeonholed into like being orchestral, I suppose.
Yeah.
Or like MIDI orchestral. And I guess Lucas, being a Taiko fan, wanted that edge, that electronic edge where someone could still do some songwriting and had some compositional chops. And I actually do have orchestral and classical and jazz background as far as writing is concerned, but the other prominent half of me is electronic music. So I think that's what he's referring to.
The music that was produced for Epitasis it's just something so unique. Like, you don't really hear it in many other games, I feel like.
No.
And I'm trying to say that in the most unbiased way possible, also.
Yeah, I was actually just listening to it today before the interview and reminding myself of it. And something that stands out to me is you listening to it in the game. It's a natural fit for those kind of alien environments you're in, but it feels like a standalone electronic album when you're listening to it outside of the game.
Right.
Like it completely stands up as its own piece of music and feels like something that a non-game artist would have completed as a full album, while a lot of game music doesn't really work that way when divorced from the game.
Yeah. I think it naturally came to that direction too. Just because of the nature of how we produced it and then how we fit the tracks into the game too.
So that's something I'm curious about, is what was that process like? Was there like interactivity in the music in terms of it fading certain parts in and out, or like how did that kind of collaboration work in terms of fitting the music into the game?
Sure. So we actually developed our own little system for the music where Pejman, we basically would focus on, because Epitasis has 5 sort of main areas for the player to explore. And so we would focus one track on each area, essentially, because that was the easiest way to kind of just break it down. And then we knew that there was going to be these puzzle sections and then exploration sections in the game. So each track was sort of designed around having the suite of different feels and, I guess, nuances almost within each that fit those requirements. And what would happen is, and Pejman can elaborate on this, but he would essentially start working on a track, and by the time it was completed, he would break it down into these multiple stems that could be anywhere from like 15 seconds to 30 seconds to even as long as like a minute. And using the system that we developed, we would fade basically layers of those stems in and out depending on what the player was currently doing in the game. So if they were exploring, it might be more ambient, but still some light like synth under the like wind or something. But then as they would progress into like a puzzle area, the music would swell and build up and become more, not overbearing, but it would
dense,
mix well. It would become loud. Yeah, dense. That's a good word for it.
And to elaborate what Lucas is saying, essentially, I would write a fully fleshed out track with all of its elements, all of its parts, and then the way I often write music is I have a lot of layers and or textures involved. That's while you're listening to like the fully fleshed out, like the fully realized piece of music. And when you just solo 2 or 3 or 4 instruments out of the 15 that are all firing at the same time, or 20 different sounds that are firing at the same time, it sounds like a new piece of music, even though it's quintessentially the same song, just another side of it. And so, basically build a fully fleshed out piece of music that has its solid identity, and then subtractively carve away. And then at which angle you carve away, that can represent this more peaceful part. And then not only are you carving away from like 1 minute, each different minute of music will have a different section too. So there's songwriting involved, and in each section being fully dense in the finished track that you hear on the soundtrack. Well, there's plenty of sounds to take away and isolate and focus on other sounds. And this is the kind of general idea we're talking about as far as stems. Many stems making up the whole, but taking away from the whole for different parts of the level, and to create this interactive dynamic, which, goes as far back as Dire Docks or the water level in Super Mario 64, that once you once you step into the water, the pads come in, and those pads or the string sounds are always there, but they're not playing until you go into the water. But the full song is with the string sounds or pads. So it's a pretty old but ultra effective.
Well, it's the golden rule of video games is that everything goes back to Mario 64.
Yeah, I mean,
in some way,
textbook reference.
It is the Kevin Bacon of video games.
I mean, we had Mario 64 reference at the very end of the game too. I don't know if
really?
The credits.
Yeah, sort of. I don't. Yeah, with the credits. So at the end of Mario 64, they kind of fly through all the levels, sort of, so to speak. And we did the same sort of thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Man, that's great. But I really like what you were just saying, Pejman, because I feel like a lot of modern game soundtracks, when I listen to them, especially orchestral ones that are heavily, that are heavily adapted to the game, they're not super compelling to listen to outside because they're trying to be ambient music. They never really ever develop an identity or a melody that really sticks with me.
Yeah, melody is very huge and key. Melody's a big deal. I think that's what a lot of Western game music has lacked over the last decade or two.
Yeah, but you found an interesting way around that by basically saying, hey, I can have my ambient music with no melody just by removing portions of it, but it's building up to that eventual payoff.
Right.
You eventually, and that would explain why when listening to the soundtrack, it felt like a full album because I was getting the full pieces of music.
Yeah, that's awesome. We were kind of just loosely walking our way in the dark with a general idea of what to do, but it's nice to hear that it paid off that way because that's what we were going for.
Yeah,
I think another cool element of it is that music is often more. I mean, repetition is what endears us to music. It's why pop songs, play the same chorus over and over again. And so that idea of priming someone for the full song with just elements of it before you hear it is actually kind of cool because, like you said, you might not notice that the ambient music is the same as the thing playing with 15 instruments, but you have been being developed towards it.
Yeah, actually, as you're saying it, I haven't necessarily thought of it that deeply, or haven't articulated it in that way, at least. But yeah, it is. The repetition is very important. It's actually what establishes a song's identity. If you never go back to, and this is a musical term, an A section where it's like the first thing you hear. If you never go back to it to tie it together, per se, it doesn't ever establish an identity of that's the theme. That's kind of what this song's about. And now I'm going to build on that now that I've repeated it and go somewhere new, but connected. And I guess maybe that's kind of what's played into it being able to stand as an LP on its own, and devoid of the game. But then it's cool to know that once you listen to it with that, for someone to listen to it in that perspective through that lens of, oh, this is just an album, but then they realize, oh, this is actually a soundtrack to a game, and it doubles as a standalone album, and also yet it's written as a soundtrack for a game. These points about repeating and building on simple elements that are all part of a whole song's identity. That style, that system, all plays into, perhaps, at least I'm realizing now, what contributed to that end result.
Yeah.
It's nice to have the ambient and the melodic function both being fulfilled by the same piece of music somehow.
I was just going to say, going back to the album real quick, I did want to mention that I think another reason that it feels so much more like an album than maybe a video game soundtrack at the same time is also its length. Pejman and I had decided on the length of the album like pretty early on, just as like a more contractual thing that we wanted to figure out. And I think it ended up actually working out really well, because, you know, you look at so many other video game soundtracks and they're like, they can be, you know, an hour and 30 minutes or an hour and 40 minutes or something. And Epitasis soundtrack is only around 40, 45 minutes or something. Yeah. And that's more traditional, I think, for an album. And then the tracks also, I remember talking with Pejman before we released it about the order of the tracks and stuff like that too. And I think that also helps bring, it feels like a video game album in that regard, but it also feels like a regular LP as well. And
of course, the artwork is fantastic.
Lucas.
that was a lot of iterating back and forth too. That was fun. Yeah. That was definitely worth it.
He was extremely patient with my revision notes. I'm sure I drove him nuts, but he's just so gracious.
I'm sure I got all 40 revisions sitting around somewhere.
I guess last thing that probably contributes to the album sound is the sounds used. They're not very generic. I guess, you know, you're not hearing the same tired synth. The sounds. They're all they're kind of either crafted or really dug for, like, you know, or modified or just personalized, so that there is just the sonic territory, the tone of the sounds are also signature Epitasis. You know, the palette, if you will, the tonal palette is consistent and fairly unique. So that's something else that ended up paying off tremendously.
And the idea of palette, going back to art, that's one of the things that really blew me away when I played Epitasis earlier this year, is especially from when I heard it was just a one-man project, I kind of had set my expectations, and then I started playing it and I'm like, this art is phenomenal. Like, this game looks so beautiful.
Thank you.
And
it really is.
It was a wonderful marriage between the art and the music, because like you said, Pejman, that idea of both of them seem to have this very intentional sense of the palettes and doing a lot with a little. It's like they were restrained, but by being restrained and choosing very carefully, it was just pleasant to be a part of and look at, even if it, you know, not a ton is happening in Epitasis compared to a lot of games, because it's a very simple exploration game. Right. But that minimalism, I think, really works for it.
Yeah, thank you.
My little sister has been listening to Epitasis more as time has gone by. Like, you know, I feel like it has a sleeper hit quality in that regard, that people may discover it later and feel like, whoa, what is this? This is great. And so she's fallen in love with it more, and she kind of gave me this idea that I'm just going to relay over while we're all here on this chat. She was saying, I love Epitasis, I love the music, I love just listening to the soundtrack, and I love the world, but she's not a gamer. And the thing is, I know Epitasis has that quality of it appeals to people who don't play video games. It does have that going for it. But to someone who really just isn't going to play video games because of lack of time or whatever other reason, she was just like, is there a way there can just be a 40-minute music video of the entire album playing through from track 1 through 12, and it's just like I get to be in the world of Epitasis, but I don't have to do anything or play anything. But it's like I'll feel like I'm walking around in that beautiful world, and there's just like this like custom made music video for the soundtrack. For those of us who don't ever play a video game at all.
Right.
And I'm like, that's a really good idea. I'm gonna let them know.
That is a really good idea.
So there you have it.
I almost feel like the end credits is almost like a slight foray.
Yes,
into
it's somewhat like
Yeah.
I guess it's asking for the end credits, but a 40-minute version where it's a total a thorough tour of the beauty of the world, and and going along with the full soundtrack.
We might have to do something there.
Yeah. I thought it was a really nice idea, so I just had to bring that up.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That could be cool.
Your sister has good ideas.
Yeah, she does.
Thanks, Yasmin.
That's awesome because I think it it has that concept album feel where the artwork and the music feel like they should go together. And so that video in isolation to me, I would definitely keep that playing for a while.
On loop.
That's really cool. Yeah, there you go. So something I'm curious about, you guys mentioned Taiko, obviously big inspiration. Were there any other game soundtracks that inspired you, or was it mostly the Taiko?
Honestly, at least for myself, I'm not sure about Pejman, but I'm not really sure there was that many other like game albums that inspired me. It was more so a lot of electronic music, so like Taiko, of course, as we mentioned, but Boards of Canada is another really big one for me.
Washed Out,
and then Washed Out, especially their album Paracosm. I almost, when I was thinking of names for the game forever ago, I was almost settled on that similar name. But those are like the main. That's like the main trio right there. I think that really inspired Epitasis back in, especially in 2016, when a lot of my ideas were really being filled in. Yeah.
I always like that when inspiration for games comes from outside of games, because I feel it stands out a lot more in the medium. Well, like we were just talking about, it feels more like an electronic album than just a game soundtrack.
Right.
And so the more we can keep pulling from outside of the world of games, I think the more rich games will continue to be.
Yeah.
Rather than just trying to, make the Halo soundtrack again or make the Mario soundtrack again, which they're great. Don't get me wrong.
It feels like the video game medium is just a great platform to bring a myriad of inspiration from different parts, independent of each other, into one product.
Actually, going back now, I just opened up Spotify and I'm looking at my my playlist for Epitasis that I made back in 2016, and pretty much all of it is Taika, Washed Out, a little bit of Boards of Canada, and then I also have some random stuff in there too, such as Aphex Twin. They're in there too, and then 65 Days of Static, which is of course No Man's Skies, the artist that did the soundtrack for that game.
No Man's Sky is the closest I can think of, like art style and feeling wise, to Epitasis that I played.
Yeah,
there was one game. Oh yeah, Hyper Light Drifter. That was probably one loosely connected inspiration too for the soundtrack.
Yeah,
as far as game soundtracks go.
That's actually very true. Yeah, I love Hyper Light Drifter's soundtrack. Disasterpiece did a fantastic job there, and a fantastic game too. Gameplay great.
Didn't he do Fez as well?
Yeah, I think Fez is another one we probably talked about too. Pejman.
Yeah, I actually remember. I've only listened to the soundtrack while playing the game. It'd be nice to listen to it again outside of the game, but I do remember it having a very evocative effect and immersive quality to it.
Yeah. Disasterpiece is very special among game musicians for sure.
Yeah. And Disasterpiece is another interesting musician too, I think, where he's done film as well. So I think it's called It Follows. You listen to the soundtrack by itself, and it does sound very much like a video game soundtrack, but it goes very well with the movie somehow.
But back to what we were saying, I feel like games have become kind of the Wild West for music, in that there are not these established rules and conventions to the same extent there are in other mediums. And you really are just allowed to pull in whatever genre you want, kind of because that's what games did when they started. Like Koji Kondo pulled all sorts of strange instrumentation for the Mario games. They seemed like they were switching genres every game.
Yeah, originally it was like ragtime, Latin jazz.
Right.
Exactly.
A fusion of ragtime and Latin jazz is essentially Mario music.
And you get your steel drums in there and just like all sorts of weird stuff going on. Like the world of Mario is crazy eclectic. There are turtles with fighting football players, and it's just like none of this makes any sense. They were just doing what was fun. And because Nintendo was so popular, that set the standard for everyone else. Right. So it's been a very open space to just try everything from full-on jazz and stuff like Cuphead to electronic with this. And I like that. And I think Western games, especially big-budget Western games, have really been trending towards, like, let's basically become Hollywood movies with our soundtracks. And I think that's a fun style to have as well. I like keeping alive the idea that games can be more than that. There are a lot of different types of music that can fit here.
Yeah. And, the other thing, too, that Epitasis really had going for it is that, again, personal project here, and we didn't really have a huge budget or anything, so there wasn't really this feeling that we had to, like, play it safe, so to speak, in terms of pretty much anything. So we kind of just, did what we felt was best, and I think it worked out for the best. Yeah.
So, and I'm always interested in the nitty-gritty side. Is it a Unity game?
It's an Unreal Engine 4 game.
Okay. Yeah. Unreal Engine.
It's
primarily... That would help explain why it looks so good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Unreal.
Yeah, thank you, Unreal. Thank you, Epic Games.
But it's the man and not the machine. So you use the user.
Believe me, if I tried to make something in Unreal, it wouldn't look like Epitasis. So
that we did. There was Lucas piloting Unreal.
Thank you.
Make it happen.
I would say, Unreal. I'm not going to do an Unreal versus Unity because they're both fantastic engines and tools, but Unreal does come out of the box with a lot of really nice features that do get, a certain aesthetic going very fast and very quickly for an artist, which is extremely beneficial and nice.
That sounds inspiring.
Yeah, and were you primarily an artist and then you learned game design to go along with that?
Right. So I graduated high school in 2013. And then after that, I went to community college for 2 years studying game art and design. So my background there was primarily art, and that degree, even though it was game art, was very traditional art. Like we took color theory and color or art history and a lot of art classes like drawing, sketching. And then after I graduated, I went and worked at Bethesda Game Studios for about a year doing QA on Elder Scrolls Online. Yeah. But after I left that, I went back to school for programming, and that's when I started Epitasis. So Epitasis to me was sort of an art project, but it was also a foray into really learning programming and a lot of the skills I was learning in school at the time. So I've learned a lot since Epitasis. So like the next project, I'm working on that, and then I go back to Epitasis and I look at the code and I'm just like, oh God, like how did this run? How did this work?
Yes.
What was I thinking? Yeah. So
do you ever see your old code and already feel like, oh, that was so inefficient, I could have written that code better?
Right. Yeah. And even for like the console version, I've already gone back and just like redone like a few things because it's just better. So
nice.
It's like, we need to do a Epitasis Game of the Year edition. All right, time to with all the DLC.
So I graduated college actually this past May, and I've been working as a full-time software engineer now. So
wow,
again, like
a long way from your artist roots.
Right. So Epitasis console version, again, like it's still just something in my free time, which is why it's taken so long. But
right.
Yeah.
Totally. But I love, as someone who dabbles in a lot of different hobbies, I love taking a project and like using the project as a way to learn something.
Right.
Like, I think it's not only the best way to learn, but it gives you a lot more time to be working on interesting creative stuff if it's also developing the skills at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. And like my full-time job, it's not something I can be extremely creative with too, because again, I really like the art side of things too, and not just programming. So it's nice when, I'm working on my own thing and I'm getting tired of, programming, I can just jump into the art, and then vice versa. So
yes,
I'm not just labored to one thing, I suppose.
Yeah, and it
Keeps
also
things
gives you
interesting.
that.
Yeah, it's
because art and programming, people don't normally connect those two. You don't think of one person being able to do both,
right? Yeah, that doesn't happen very often, I guess. Not trying to be narcissistic, but I guess it doesn't.
No, it's just true.
Yeah.
It's rare.
Yeah,
or less common.
right.
It's if you have those two skills, game development is like the perfect cross section of them.
Yeah,
and I think that's something that's really appealing about game development to people like that. I know the Undertale was created by one guy.
Right.
Stardew Valley was created, I think, by one guy. He might have brought one person in for the art, but there are some, and they composed their music as well. And so games, something I love about games is that they bring together like all of our artistic disciplines and get them working together in harmony.
Yes.
And I think that's what's really, really fun about them.
Yeah.
And stuff like Unity and Unreal is making it possible for one person to actually be able to make really cool stuff.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say too. Yeah. It's gotten to the age now where one person can really just sit down at their home computer and just produce whatever they want, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And there's not really that many barriers anymore, because again, like when I went to college, when I went to community college for game art and design, a lot of those barriers still existed. Like Unreal 4 had just come out and it was still $20 a month. Unity required a license, but now all of those barriers are gone because that's just the way it's progressed. That just makes it better for everybody, I think, because now you just get more unique games like Epitasis, So
Yep. And from the composer side of things, there are lots more projects going on to work on. Yeah. So a lot more to do there. So I'm curious, Pejman, have you ever been like, I should make my own game? Has that ever been a dream of yours?
No, it hasn't.
No ideas kicking around there of what the perfect Pejman game would be?
Oh, shoot. I just want I honestly, the perfect Pejman games would just be a lot of N64 games redone in HD.
There you go.
I just want like my Wave Race 128, my Super Mario 128.
We never got Super Mario 128. It's very disappointing.
I know, and I'm still waiting.
Yeah.
Where is it?
I know. Yeah.
Those games, I just feel like a lot of gaming mechanics were essentially perfected by that point. I haven't seen too much improvement in terms of control and gameplay since N64. I think the water physics they programmed in Wave Race 64 are still a standard reference. I can't believe they were able to program those water physics, and the way your jet ski would land at an angle of a wave. It's super satisfying.
It's interesting that you mentioned this because just the other day, my brother Steven was playing this old N64 game called Glover.
Glover.
It was basically like a Mario 64 style thing, but you were controlling a glove that moved around this ball. But it was like they fully physically modeled the ball and it had its own physics and you could throw it around and bounce it up and down. And it was like weirdly complex. And I think back to some games on the N64, and you're right, especially like Mario 64, like you had complete control of that character in a way that a lot of modern games have kind of stripped it down in a way.
Yeah. It's kind of, I feel like a lot of new games have dumbed down that amount of precision of control.
It's very automated.
Yeah, there's a lot of like room for error in newer games, like especially the newer Mario games, Galaxy series or Odyssey. There's a little bit of like a rubbery component to the control. Like it kind of like there's a little wiggle room at the end, whereas there's more raw rigidness, but it's smooth.
Right.
It's very like, it's total control. It's very analogous to your movements with the controller. And I miss that kind of hard-edged, hard-cut, snappy and sensitive element of control
But yeah, I totally know what you mean. Like, my favorite racing game still is Rush 2049. It was a game
love
on the
that one.
N64.
I love Rush 2049.
And you had complete control of the car. It like had wings that could stick out. And you could perfectly, like, it's not just press a button and do a trick. You would move the car in exact 360-degree motion. And if you got it wrong, you'd crash.
Yes.
And I think as games audiences opened up, stuff like Assassin's Creed and Uncharted is like, hey, we want everyone to be able to play this, which I totally get. So now, hold the A button.
Yeah, the core gamer got a little
Yeah.
alienated and at the expense of let's make it very consumer friendly. And I get it. It's great for business.
That's definitely a thing that like AAA sort of games with big budgets have, sort of gone to,
Right.
trying to mass appeal to everybody. And I mean, it works.
Yes,
but
it does. There's a reason they have budgets that big.
And it kept going. You had Pilot Wing 64, Star Fox 64.
Yeah.
The list goes on that console. Like, that really was a good benchmark. And I think you could really just up the resolution of the textures and not even make them necessarily look real. Like, I like the cartoony vibe that N64 had.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily need to look anything to look hyper realistic as much as just nice lighting and texture.
Right.
But retain the art style. I wouldn't want it to look more real necessarily, but more impressive.
There's clarity there.
Yeah.
And I've been playing Episode 1 Racer. Also, super good game. Another great racing game from the N64 era. Like,
I remember that
You're
one.
speaking my language here, Pejman.
So it doesn't really feel like gameplay has advanced much except for the second analog stick.
I mean, that is very
dual
good. Like,
analog
I think
stick
shooters have absolutely become playable since the N64.
Yeah, once Halo did that, it made sense.
I mean, if you think about the modern controller hasn't really evolved in like 2 decades almost. Again, with Halo 1.
Yeah.
I mean, when the Xbox came out with their controller, I mean, that's pretty much it.
But I feel like we've seen like a resurgence of hyper precise like 2D games with stuff like Celeste and that's kind of become its own genre. Now you have me hoping, Pejman, that we're going to get like the 3D games getting their retro throwbacks and indie developers really trying to recapture Wave Race and Mario and all that. So maybe that's coming down the pike.
Oh yeah.
Maybe.
I think it's already happening a little bit.
Yeah.
Occasionally I'll see stuff on Twitter that does remind me a lot of that earlier, era of games.
I think it's moving. But speaking of modern games, I did want to touch on one of your recent projects, Pejman, No Straight Roads. And that's an interesting game. I had somehow missed that it was happening entirely until you mentioned it to me the other day. But it was people from Final Fantasy 15 and Street Fighter 5, developers from there that wanted to make their own action-adventure game. And I don't even know how to describe it. It's like, I haven't played it. I've looked it up and I listened to the soundtrack. But it's like, it reminds me most of like Jet Set Radio, but like, what would you say? How would you describe that game?
Jet Set Radio is one of the primary influences.
Okay.
It does have a
cool.
It also you're pretty accurate there. Psychonauts kind of in terms of presentation and gameplay as well. There are definitely cues from rhythm games like Jammer Lammy or Parappa the Rapper. But still keeping the action-adventure component as the primary mode of playing.
Right.
It's in a nutshell, you play as two rockers or punk rockers who are fighting back against the evil or quote evil EDM empire. There's a record label that's become super powerful in a city called Vinyl City. And EDM is all the rage, and as the game says, or the CEO of the label says, the age of rock is over. EDM is all the rage now. So there's this conflict of you're denied your right to rock, and so well, what happened to rock music? You kind of like have a skewed audition. that is biased against you. You realize later, and that kind of prompts you to. And also, there's a unique technology in Vinyl City in the game where music is what's used to generate power and electricity for the city. So,
okay.
The power goes out in the city except for the record label. So a lot of there's like this like oppressive, cartoony quality to it that like the city's out like low on power. Restore the power using rock.
Right.
But all the bosses are these delightfully charismatic and full of personality EDM bosses. So you kind of hijack their concerts one by one. And there's like this ironic twist to it that you're just kind of like becoming just like them. You're defeating No Straight Roads, the record label, by becoming like No Straight Roads. Like now you're taking control over. And there is this ironic arc to the plot, and it's an action adventure game, and it's not really a rhythm game, but a lot of the levels and enemies and bosses attack you in rhythm to the music, or even to the specific melodies in the song. But it's not primarily a rhythm game. It's a music centric action adventure game, and that's the arc. That's the presentation and style of the game. And I wrote the music with my three good buddies, Falk, James Landino, and Andy Tunstall. We were the original four that wrote those Sonic fan game soundtracks, Sonic BTS and Sonic ATS. And like the band is back together, but now for like an actually published, semi-majorly, and we're a semi-major published game, or with a legit publisher in Sold Out. They've been great. Metronomic is the developer, which was led by Final Fantasy 15 lead designer Juan Hosmer, aka Haas, and his cousin, who was the illustrator for Street Fighter V, and concept artist for Street Fighter V. His name is Daim. Don't want to butcher his last name. I'd have to get.
Yeah, I'm looking at the last name. I'm like, I can't say it.
I can read it. I can probably pronounce it correctly if I read it, but forgive me, Daim.
Yeah.
And they're actually they're experienced game developers who've worked with major developers in Japan, but they're Malaysian as well, and they want to put Malaysia on the games industry game development map. And this is kind of one of the first major outings, a product solely from Malaysia. And so I
didn't know that.
They're really showing that they have major talent there, and it's kind of a diamond in the rough, a hidden gem, which can now, hopefully turn the tide, and like they can have a piece of the gaming industry pie, and give us more things to love and enjoy. And it's just been an awesome experience. So nice to finally have that game finished and out. We've been working on it for about 2.5 years, and it's just such a good feeling to finally race to the finish, do your best, and like have it out there for people to enjoy, and you can kind of for a moment kick back and relax and witness people receiving it so well. Thankfully.
That's so awesome.
Thanks, Lucas.
Yeah,
thanks,
congrats.
Yeah,
congrats.
Super stoked. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, this is very cool. It's on PS4, Xbox One, Switch. So it's
and
fully
PC.
Published on everything, and PC, and you can indeed get a vinyl for it
it's hard to find. I hope they print a new batch.
Yeah. Right.
Because I think they underestimated the demand for the collector's edition and the vinyl.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's Vinyl City. Come on.
Come on.
That's so cool. Yeah, I listened through the full soundtrack, which takes a while. It's a very big soundtrack.
Yeah, it's 46 tracks. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. And so I'm assuming from how the bosses were laid out that it transitions between the different versions during the fights, because they're like different. There's like a rock and EDM and a basic version of most boss fights, or how does that work?
There are 3 for each boss. There there is a theme, a bass version theme. Which is electronic, but then there's usually there's an EDM version of the same song and a rock version of the same song. So each boss has 3 variations of the same song. EDM plays if you're not doing well, and the rock version starts playing if you're doing well and beating the boss.
Cool.
And each boss is separated by 3 to 4 phases, in which this part, like minute-long part of the song, will loop as you try to defeat this phase.
Yep. That makes sense, because the boss songs are like 7 minutes long.
Yeah, they're all 5 to 6 minutes long, 5 to 7 minutes long, and so they, each minute represents a phase, or maybe a little bit over a minute, but represents a phase of the boss before it enters the next phase.
Yep.
And there's a really cool, that's a really cool interactive, dynamic music system that's implemented into No Straight Roads that makes it a little more unique and such a fun experience.
Yeah, it was fun to listen through because I love Sonic music, especially like Sonic Adventure, the modern Sonic music, the rock stuff.
That game
I just grew up with it.
I feel like the game doesn't escape a lot of its like. It reminds me of Sonic Adventure a lot when I play it. It has that vibe going.
Yes. It's super, and the music, especially the rock stuff, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I get more Sonic music out of nowhere. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And I know the EDM's supposed to be the bad guys, but I'm like, this EDM stuff's really good.
That's the general consensus, the general sentiment is like, I know these are bad guys, but I'm kind of down with the bad guys because their music's so good.
Yeah, they kind of make a compelling point here.
It's supposed to kind of befuddle or perplex you, like, who am I rooting for here? Like that's kind of a major attribute of the game.
But definitely one of my highlights of the album was getting to hear you do Vaporwave.
I'm really thankful that the developers greenlit that. It took a little convincing, but keyword a little.
Yeah.
And they saw it and were like, oh yeah, no, this actually works, especially the whole underwater mermaid electronic virtual idol theme. It totally suits
that's awesome.
Yep. Yeah. So it's really cool. I highly recommend everyone check that out, at the very least the soundtrack or the game itself, because it's really neat stuff. It does remind me of old school Sega, and that's great to see around.
Thank you.
All right. So I don't know. We talked a little beforehand that you guys have an upcoming project, but you can't talk too much about that, right?
Yeah, we haven't really disclosed anything about it yet.
Okay.
So
we'll keep that under wraps, but something to look forward to at least.
Yeah, it's pretty different than Epitasis. Definitely not another puzzle game, or it definitely has exploration in it, but it's not like a walking sim almost puzzle game.
Yeah.
Definitely more, I guess I could say it is action oriented, so there's that. So it's been a different breed working on this game, and we've been working on it for about I guess like a year now. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see once we show it off and what people think, because it is a little scary to work on something for that long.
Yeah,
and like not show anybody.
Yep.
But it is kind of nice not playing like the rat race essentially of the marketing every week and trying to keep up with that. So
Yeah.
just being able to just focus on the game and like just work on it and flesh everything out before starting to show it off has been really nice. And, you know, sitting in quarantine, even though I'm working from home and stuff too, has given me a lot of free time to really just hammer out so much stuff on the project. So I think pretty soon we'll be showing some things off.
That's great. Yeah, I'm really excited to see it. And I think sometimes there's so much feedback and stuff on the internet all the time. Sometimes it's nice to really develop an idea in isolation because it's really going to be its own and not be just a response to what people want. And I think that could be a good thing sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I don't really have like a giant substantial following on like Twitter or anything, but I do think that when people look at my stuff, they do tend to think of like Epitasis and very colorful ambient exploration sorts of things. So this is going to be very different in terms of that, I think. And it'll be interesting to see how people react to it in that regard.
And much like Epitasis pushed me to somewhere that was kind of a natural evolution of my more typical music, even though I already explore a lot of genres. Epitasis still did push me out of a comfort zone, and you know, none of my other music is exactly quite like Epitasis. Epitasis prompted me to enter a new sonic signature identity, and to kind of form that and establish it, which was somewhat of a departure from my normal work. In much the same way that Epitasis did that, I'm looking forward to Lucas's new project doing that again for me, where it pushes me outside of really anything I've done or anything I normally do. I love that. I love that challenge.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I definitely think it will it'll push Pejman out of his comfort zone once again, because it's already doing it to me, and you know, it'll be again interesting to see what happens there. But I think I've been keeping Pejman updated with everything as it progresses, so I think we're both kind of almost on the same page about what kind of game it is and what we're going for aesthetically and I guess musically almost too. So yeah, indeed.
And you got anything else you want to plug here, Pejman? Any other projects you're on?
I am. It's not. Well, I can just. It's not advertised heavily, and that's kind of fine because it's really more for the game to shine. Like the music is very supportive, of it, but it is very exciting music that I'm doing for a new game. That's coming out. It's a brawler, kind of inspired by. Imagine Japanese kaiju monsters. Brawling in a kind of Super Smash meets Power Stone meets Rampage fighter. And so it's a fighter, it's a brawler, and it's called Gigabash, and it's a really fun and exciting game. Development's already come a very long way, but they're just pretty ambitious. It won't be coming out until sometime next year, but there's already plenty of media on it. If you were to look up Gigabash, and it's
sweet.
It's a bunch of kaiju inspired monsters duking it out. Total party game. It's a total like frenzy, and it's really stylish, cute, and infectious. The art in terms of art style, and it plays really well. It plays like a real proper fighter, and I'm making I'm making a lot of kind of 80s anime style all the way to just full on electronic and just very animative music for this game Gigabash, and it's being developed by this developer Passion Republic. They're a developer that they've always been an in-house talent that always lends their talents to AAA developers. Anything from Injustice to Gears of War 4 to a total who's who of all the, what is that name? Uncharted, the Uncharted series. They always lend assets. They like lend their talents for assets, environments, characters, whatever you need for a major developer to outsource. But now, for the first time, they're making their own in-house game, and they're also based in Malaysia too. So, Malaysia is being really, really good to me, and I'm really thankful to them and for them to give me the chance to write music for their awesome games. And
that's cool.
I'm really proud of what that country's doing, and entering the gaming scene, because like America and Japan are obviously well established.
Oh yeah,
you have UK, and then you have Canada, or like, isn't Ubisoft based in Canada?
They are based in France. But they have
So there you go.
But they have huge studios in Canada.
The Korean market, the Korean game development scene is also strong too, and so it's really cool to see. Malaysia's got some sleeper hits. They're coming out with the punches, and it's cool to see, and I'm stoked to be a part of it. And that's the project, Gigabash.
All right, well, thank you both so much for joining me for the interview. This was great, and Epitasis is a really special project. So
thank you, Bryan.
Thank you for having us.
Total pleasure to chat with you and Lucas.